most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laid aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the king, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Good morning. This meeting of the Honorable Senate for Friday, December the 9th, 2022 is called to order. Before we begin the business of the day, Senators Gabriel Morris and Shireen Golden Campbell seek your concurrence permission for them to join the meeting online. All in favor? Aye. And before we go further, one of our members have had recently much opportunity for celebration, as someone dear and near to them in the form of Elton Elumbe Motley was recently preferred by the nation of Barbados and conferred with that nation's highest honor, the freedom of Barbados. And I wish that to members place on record their congratulations to him. And of course, to our own Senator Donna Scott Motley. I'm trying to look at the legislation to see if she is now to be referred to as the most honorable Scott Motley. And if not, then certainly it ought to be that way. So please convey, of course, my personal congratulations, and congratulations to the members. Congratulations of the members of the Senate to him. And for those of you who do not know, he was recognized as an author and a cultural activist, and someone who has played a remarkable role in shaping the identity of what is referred to as the New Barbados. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. These circulated the second supplementary estimate for the year 2022-2023. Also the monetary policy statement dated August 2022, supported by the quarterly monetary policy report for May 2022, volume 22, number 2, and the quarterly monetary policy report dated August 2022, volume 23, number 1. Reports of investigation into the failure of Horace Daly, a former member of Parliament, to file a statutory declaration with the Integrity Commission. White paper number 3 of 2022 entitled the National Investment Policy. White paper number 4, 2022 entitled National Population and Sustainable Development Policy of Jamaica. White paper, Ministry paper number 93 of 2022 entitled Annual Report of the Auditor General Department for the financial year 2020-2021. Ministry paper number 94 of 2022 entitled Report on the Appropriation Account, Auditor General's Department for the financial year 2020-2021. Ministry paper number 95 of 2022 entitled National Population and Sustainable Development Policy. Ministry papers numbers 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, and 102 respectively with respect to the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Act 2017, for one, the Augustown Community the Augustown Community Zone Social Intervention, 2, the Greenwich Town Community Zone Social Intervention, 3, the Denham Town Community Zone Social Intervention, 4, the Mount Salem Community Social Intervention, 5, the Norwood Community Zone Social Intervention, 6, the Savannah-Lamar Zone Social Intervention, and 7, the Parade Gardens Zone Social Intervention, respectively, and their respective orders and resolutions. Annual Report on Audited Financial Statement of the Port Authority of Jamaica for the financial year 2020-2021. The Independent Commission of Investigations report reflecting the periods January to March 2022, April to June 2022, and July to September 2022. The Jamaica Gazette Supplement, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations, Volume 145, numbers 297 and 298, dated Tuesday, December 6, 2022. The Emergency Powers Act, the Emergency Powers, Parish of St. Anne, Clarendon, and St. James, and specified areas in the parishes of Kingston and St. Andrew, Regulations 2022 under the Emergency Powers Act, and the Emergency Powers Parishes of St. James, Westmoreland, and Nonova, number 2, Regulations 2022 under the Emergency Powers Act.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives, petitions, papers, reports from the football match, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the Senate, motions for leave to introduce bills, the presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained, public business. Senator Samuda.
Thank you, Mr. President, and assuming permission from a seat not usually my own.
Yes, go ahead, please, Mr. Samuda.
Today is expected to be a short sitting but consequential one, as we expect to have contributions from Senator Gale to the State of the Nation debate and have the debate actually closed by Senator Campbell Rodriguez, Mr. President.
The State of the Nation debate
Resume.
can't resume today. Those
Yes,
in
sir.
favor? Against? So I call now on Senator Gale, who of course is the recent recipient of the United States Embassy Stakeholders Appreciation and Recognition Award. Senator Gale, I noticed that you were in some good company with that that award there.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, that is what social media does. It demonstrates your business. Mr. President, Today I rise to make my presentation in the State of the Nation debate. And I want to commend the other speakers for their contributions thus far. The theme of my presentation is caring for labor through partnership. Mr. President, in offering this presentation, I must say thanks to the Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Andrew Holness, for the confidence that he has reposed in me in requesting that I continue to serve in this Honourable Senate. Mr. President, the work of a trade unionist is by no means an easy task. It can be challenging, it can be grueling, and when you merge that role with the Senate, it creates an enhanced expectation in terms of delivery. Those responsibilities definitely requires moral support. And so, my dear family has provided tremendous support. My wife Christine, my sons Krishna and Corey, I thank them for the enormous support that they have given me through the years. In fact, I must pay special credit to my wife. We have been friends for close to 32 years. And Mr. President, anybody that can put up with me for 32 years deserves a whole lot of credit. In addition, the family that I spend my Fridays with, my Senate colleagues, I also want to thank you for the support that you continue to keep me grounded. And I thank you for that. The team I lead at the BITU for the past 15 years have been my rock and anchor. They have been there as my aid, my backing, and my encouragement. Very important support for leadership. Mr. President, the staff of this Parliament has made life working here very easy, and they must be commended. Mr. President, I want to acknowledge the effective leadership of the Most Honourable Prime Minister and his team for the expert guidance through the passage of the pandemic and for this continued commitment and demonstration in rebuilding Jamaica. Mr. President, many countries and their populations are still struggling. We are experiencing growth in the economy, and we have surpassed our expectation in job creations. There is much to be thankful for. President, I want to pay special recognition to a group of people. We see them every day at the bus stops, in taxis, in their own vehicles. We interface with them in the production of goods and services. Some we see, some we hear. Whether they are physical at their workstation or operate virtually in their delivery of service, there are approximately 1.3 million of them that continues to sustain and move this great country to ensure growth. I pay special recognition to the workers of Jamaica. There is, however, a specific group in the case of this presentation that I wish to single out, and that is the public sector workers. That group of workers that have been the wheel of government, often providing exceptional services. For a public sector employee, there is some sense of pride and responsibility for carrying out tasks that contribute to the development of this country. These employees get to take on the charge to indirectly and directly create or enact positivity and change in the lives of the people of Jamaica by the services they offer. I pay a special tribute to our public sector workers. Mr. President, as any chef will know, recipes need the right set of ingredients to produce a delicious dish. Similarly, the right mix of people, policies, processes, and tools is imperative for achieving a modern, efficient, and effective public sector. The government of Jamaica has been pursuing that mix for some time to transform the public sector. An important element in the most recent attempt in public sector transformation is the introduction of the new public sector compensation system, a journey that began in December 2018 and will ensure that public sector workers are competitively compensated and incentivized to deliver excellent service. The commitment and assurance is that no one will be worse off financially as a result of this new compensation system. Mr. President, it has been well received by the public sector workers in both central and local government. The next phase of the exercise that treats with public bodies is eagerly anticipated. I want to commend the government's commitment to this cause. And I want to get it right now, Senator Fraser-Baines. Minister Nigel Clark, the Transformation Unit team of the Ministry of Finance. The journey of transformation, however, could not have reached this stage without the support and work of the trade unions in partnership, and they must also be recognized and commended. Mr. President, we have managed to sign off on this partnership. Well, the others are encouraged to do so. Why? This government, Mr. President, don't just make promises. There's proof of the outcome, and the results speaks for itself. Mr. President, the work on transformation of the public sector must continue to ensure that we have a modern public service that is fair, values its employees, and delivers high-quality service. We must continue to transform the inefficiencies in all public operations. We must continue to make transactions costs more reasonable and reduce long waiting times in the provisions of service. We must continue to invest in ICT to drive performance. Yes. And we must remove the excessive bureaucratic processes in the public sector. Mr. President, we must also continue to seek, as best as possible, to attract, retain, and train the skill sets required to meet the mandate of an efficient and effective public sector. President, I want to move to an issue that I consider to be of national interest. That is partnership. Traditionally, some countries, when confronted with economic and social challenges, use the opportunity to implement innovative solutions to address their problems. The forging of social partnership as a specific governance model is one such innovative solution. Jamaica has also sought to use social partnership as a tool to address some of its critical national issues, and we have had such a social partnership agreement for many years now. The partners of the National Partnership Council includes the government, the parliamentary opposition, private sector, trade unions, and civil society, which includes the church, youth, women's, and human rights and environmental group representative. The underlying value of the National Partnership Council is to engage in respectful, constructive, and sustained dialogue on issues of national importance. Mr. President, social dialogue is key. It gets us to work together to treat with national issues. And it's something, Mr. President, that we must continue to pursue as a country. There was a signing of a new partnership agreement recently. The new partnership agreement is guided by underlying principles of the adherence to just the rule of law, the respect of human rights and civil liberties of all Jamaicans, accountability, informed leadership, demonstrating unimpeachable integrity, a critical focus of national society. It speaks to the protection of national and environment and improvement of public health. And last week, we listened to Senator Matthew Samuda speaking about the national environment. And one of the issues that came to my mind is the environment belongs to all of us, and we must work in partnership to protect the environment. Mr. President, the partnership guiding principles also speak to economic growth, establish on foundations of inclusiveness, equity, and sustainability. It also promotes the quality education and the foundation for nation building. And an important area to me speaks to individual and collective commitment to tolerance and maturity in conflict resolution. Mr. President, we are seen sometimes as a very aggressive nation, aggressive individuals. And we have a lot of disputes that can be resolved, whether dispute at the workplace, dispute inside here as parliamentarians. And one of the things I suggest is that we should be able to treat with our disputes in here and our behavior so that the others can see that we are leaders in conflict resolutions. Mr. President, the priority areas of the agreement have 5 strategic pillars of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and it reflects on our own Vision 2030, National Development Plan, namely prosperity, peace, planet, and partnership. And it has the following national goals: to place Jamaica in an economy on the path to full and sustained economic recovery and achieve a prosperous economy with inclusive, equitable, and sustainable economic growth. President, that's important. It's important that, whatever we do as a nation, it is geared towards not only recovery, but a prosperous economy. Mr. President, there's alarming news of a Privy Council outcome that is damaging to our country. We cannot afford any other FinSAC in this country. Another grounded goal is to ensure the people are empowered to realize their fullest potential. It also speaks to implement initiatives to protect and restore our environment and natural resources, especially those that reduce climate vulnerabilities. And it promotes to have a national ethos of dialogue, collaboration, which will involve operating in alignment with government policies and national initiatives, as well as interpersonal ministerial cooperation. The Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. President, is very committed to this partnership. And he promotes the highest level of consultation and dialogue towards achieving our national goals. Social dialogue and consultation is very important, and we must have that as part of our DNA if we are going to pursue issues of national interest. And so, social partnership is important, and we must continue to pursue social partnership. Mr. President, another important area that I want to treat with is productivity. Something that, as a country, we don't speak about much. Our nation, like many others, is faced with challenges that are the aftermath of the recent global events and have rocked our economy. our society, the way we think, and even our behavior. As prices rise, supply chains continue to be fragile, and confidence regarding our future seems uncertain. Recovery and sustainable growth are necessary for our present and future development. Mr. President, to secure the future of our nation, we must focus on productivity. Focusing on improving productivity is an opportunity that is ripe with possibilities. We must retrain our minds and practices to appreciate the full scope of benefits that productivity improvements will allow. The benefits of productivity include increased profits and real wages, reduction in waste, increased standard of living, enhanced worker well-being, economic growth, and strengthened organizations, as well as organization processes. Mr. President, there are many real opportunities that exist for our nation to benefit from investments in terms of productivity. In 2019, the World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Report ranked Jamaica as 33rd out of 141 countries in business dynamism. This meant that there were only 32 countries that perform better than us as it relates to the administrative requirements to do business and the entrepreneurial culture. However, we need to make investments to boost innovation. The same report ranked Jamaica 83rd in terms of innovation capability. This score is related to our low levels of research and development and a relative weakness in growing innovative companies and embracing disruptive ideas. I am pleased to see this, Mr. President. I am very pleased to see this. A national investment policy. More recently, the Global Innovation Index 2022 indicated that we have the highest ranked Caribbean country as it relates to innovation. The same report notes that we are performing relatively well, given that we are a middle-income country. Overall, Jamaica was ranked 76th in innovation, once labeled against as an innovation achiever. Compared to other middle-income countries, we stood out for our creative outputs and institutions. Notwithstanding, there is still room to improve the level of our innovation through education, research and development, ICT access, optimizing the use of energy, finance available for startups, diversifying our exports, quality standardization certificates, higher value exports, mobile app development, export of creative services, and supporting knowledge creation. Not surprisingly, Mr. President, all these can have meaningful effects on workplace productivity. Estimates by the Jamaica Productivity Center, Mr. President, indicate that for the January to March 2022, output per worker rose by 1% relative to that period. This is a glimmer of hope, as from 2001 and 2019, the country registered average declines in labor productivity. However, this 1% is not enough to close the gap. Not enough to catch other countries like Singapore, Mauritius, and the DOMREP, who have been averaging annual growth in labor productivity. This year, we celebrate 60 years of independence. 60 years ago, we had similar experiences to the three countries mentioned, But today, they have breezed past us in terms of productivity. Mr. President, prevailing conditions could serve to compound the productivity problem. For years, scores of graduates have been completing formal training in low-demand areas. Skilled workers have been leaving in droves, and common leadership practices have been rather ineffective. To make matters worse, efforts at improving national productivity have been consistently thwarted by complicated regulations and a lack of infrastructural support. All things considered, these conditions do not bode well for long-run productivity. Hence, if Jamaica is to make strides towards becoming a more productive economy, swift and concerted action must be taken. Productivity improvement demands a focus on public awareness. We need to talk about it. We need to promote it. We need to create that level of awareness around productivity. Capacity building, measurements. Senator Brown and Senator Webby always talk about the measurements. But I want to add another dimension to it, advocacy. We need to talk about it. We need to raise awareness about the importance of productivity, to build local support and awareness. We can no longer approach the goals of production improvement and employment improvement in separate silos. Even well-intentioned efforts of promoting productivity could yield little to no results if workers lack the requisite knowledge and skills. And so to bridge this gap, Mr. President, it is necessary to equip workers, businesses, and even the public sector with tools to measure and monitor productivity improvement to ensure success. Mr. President, this will necessitate collaborations between the Jamaica Productivity Center, educational institutions, researchers, and private sector organizations to expose individuals to productivity analysis and auditing techniques. We must all strive to be advocates of productivity. Additionally, we need more measurement. As the saying goes, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. That's true. Human resource personnel across all ministries must be trained in how to accurately measure public sector performance through appropriate key performance indicators. Finally, effective advocacy is heavily dependent on relationships. For this reason, realizing productivity gains will also require close working relationship between the Jamaica Productivity Center and its external stakeholders. This will not only ensure a seamless exchange of ideas and data, but also guarantee support for advocacy efforts. Despite the fact that firms and organizations in Jamaica do not effectively monitor productivity, there is no disputing the notion that the lack of human capital development, job skills mismatch, improper adoption of technology, long waiting times, high transportation costs, and low value added production are factors that limit productivity growth. The converse is that productivity growth leads to a rise in wages and incomes, and that has the opposite effect on inflation. Against that background, I want to urge us and I want to urge the government to expand existing efforts by one, investing more in and incentivize research and development as well as innovation towards productivity. Establishing a committee to institute a special action plan and program aimed at developing human capital. establishing productivity-focused curricula for both school-age children and professionals. If we're going to talk about productivity, let's talk about productivity at an early age of development. Let us encourage the youngsters to be more efficient and productive. And when we start from there, we build a generation. Mr. President, we must also support positive behavioral changes towards a productivity-centric culture and mindset. And this is how the Jamaica Productivity Center can work with stakeholders in promoting the advocacy and the awareness around productivity. Now, the successful implementation of these recommendations will depend on the resources at our disposal. In this respect, a designated productivity fund would be particularly useful for financing ongoing and future productivity-centered initiatives. With these funds set aside, the JPC and relevant stakeholders could readily capitalize on opportunities as they arise. Overall, it is clear that productivity is indeed everyone's business. Therefore, let us put on a united front to tackling the productivity issue. Mr. President, you know, let me a piece of paper. You know, I thought about how we can pursue productivity. And imagine you're standing outside in the wind and you have a piece of paper. And that paper falls. Chances are in the wind it will blow away. And we might not pursue it because it has no value. But if you have a $5,000 note and you stand in the wind and it falls, you could have lent me a $5,000 note. If it falls, chances are that we will pursue it because it has value. Well, you want to use 100 US? If you pursue it, it will have value because it's blowing away in the wind. Mr. President, the point I'm making is that we must pursue productivity because it has a value. And we must chase it. I want to pass to serve notice, Mr. President, that it's my intention to put a motion before this Senate to further action this matter. Mr. President, like every third world and even first world countries, Jamaica has experienced labor migration at a rate that cannot be dismissed or overlooked. And this calls for greater continuous training of our workforce. The changing nature of the workplace fuels the increased focus on employability skills. The work environment has been growingly impacted by the rapid changes in technology and the automation of jobs. Technical skills are constantly changing. Consequently, employees will need to respond to these changes by reskilling and upskilling. Employers must also recognize that employees are better able to respond to these changes.
Speaker's time has expired.
Time having expired, I wish to ask that his time be extended to allow him to complete his presentation.
And is that the Speaker's time be extended sufficiently for him to complete his presentation? Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, colleagues. You know, I haven't spoken a long time in this, for some time now. No. I am taking my time. President, I want to use the opportunity to recognize our former Senate colleague, Senator Arthur Williams, who's now ambassador. I hear you. Mr. President, employers must also recognize that employees are better able to respond to these changes if they are equipped with core employability skills to remain in their jobs or to seek new jobs. This shift is accredited largely to the change in the world's economy, influenced mainly by globalization, technological changes, and increased competition. Deepening these issues, as we very well know, is a transformative change in the world of work brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. So over the last 2 years, we would have seen a rapid change in how work has evolved. With drivers of change such as the aging population and low birth rates in developed countries, skill migration is increasingly being accepted as inevitable and necessary. In 2017, the government of Jamaica developed a national policy on international migration to harness its potential, as there is need to leverage the opportunities and minimize the negative impacts of skill migration. The reality is that while skill migration creates challenges of labor shortage for countries which individuals are immigrating from, it also brings huge benefit to both the countries people come from and in those they relocate to. Mr. President, such benefits include increased economic growth through increased investment, enhanced education and skills transfer. So chances are that if you migrate, you will learn, your capacity to develop may be greater. To treat with this migration, Mr. President, there must be engagement opportunities for employer organizations, trade unions representing workers, training institutions to collaborate with the Ministry of Labor and Social Security to train Jamaicans for immigration, circular migration, and internship opportunities overseas, through employer-funded schemes to include training, dual certification, and job placement. So we're dealing with the training, the certification, and also to place these employees in jobs. Skill migration provides numerous opportunities. However, to harness these benefits, training must emphasize to assist with the transition of international migration for both migrants and the citizens. So we have to develop a philosophy and a principle around migration of our workers. And Mr. President, these are the workers we're talking about. Our farm workers, our nurses, our construction workers, our hotel workers, our teachers and others. We must have a grounded policy to protect them for the transfer of these knowledge, the certification. Mr. President, the reality of life is that we have to compete with the skills market. And I want to suggest that in order to treat with this certainty, we must also seek to retain by offering competitive earnings to provide decent work in a competitive space. So we have workers who have the propensity to migrate for better opportunities, but we also, on the other side, must seek to retain the skills. And one of the ways of retaining such skills is for us to pay better as a country. is for us to have decent work environment in order to retain the skills. According to a recent publication of the ILO, employers are now facing greater emphasis on recruiting workers with good employability and technical skills. According to the World Economic Forum, at least 50% of all employees will need reskilling by 2025. So you can't get complacent, at least 50%, because the world of work continues to change and we are operating in a very competitive space. So right now, Mr. President, remember, when it comes to the labor market, the world has no boundaries nor borders. So we are competing with a global market space. Yes. And because of the competition of the global market space and the advent of technology and the fact that jobs continue to change, we have to continue to upskill and reskill our labor force. And this is because of the adoption of technology. As we speak today, the world of work is changing. This is as critical as operating in a volatile labor market that is highly subjected to technological innovations, demographic shifts, environmental, and even climate change. Mr. President, our agricultural sector, our tourism sector is being impacted by climate change. And globalization and productive and trade. Jamaica's productivity and competitiveness depend in large measures on how well the most vulnerable citizens are able to find meaningful employment. Yeah? Mr. President, there's a sector in society that we need to take care of, that we need to pay special attention to in this market space: the unattached youth. The unattached youth. Particularly those in volatile communities. They need access to quality training and certification if they are to break the cycle of being disadvantaged and be integrated into the labor market as skilled and productive citizens. We don't want the unattached youth to appear as being part of the labor market and to be designated as unskilled labor. We want them to be treated and to be defined as skilled labor. By providing youth at risk with the right training and development opportunities, we will be equipping them to participate in the economic, social life of their community, so they can give back to their community. If they are skilled, defined and designated as skilled labor, when they go back to their communities, they are being demonstrated as a key example, and so others can follow. Mr. President, priority focus should be given to increasing the reach of programs and services and increasing participation. So, not only to provide the service, not only to provide the programs, but to ensure that there's growth in terms of participation. Youth engagement and the reintroduction, Mr. President, of national service. To this end, Mr. President, we must continue to increase opportunities for youth at risk to access and to participate in products and services such as being offered by the Heart Trust, NSTA Trust. There must be deliberate strategies to strengthen the delivery modalities, the number of access points of institutions, and programs for service. So we talk about the modalities. But the access points is important so that they have opportunities of reach. And we must consider the following critical questions. How will we improve how we go about researching the needs of youth at risk? We can't just plan for them. We have to research. We have to determine what they want, to include them to reach the target. How will we strengthen the relationship with local organizations in the ecosystem to develop and deliver the programs and services? How will we engage youth not as beneficiaries, but as partners in designing and carrying out the programs? So we must not look at them as just being mere beneficiaries. We must work with them to become partners so that they own. Vested interests, equity. Yes. How will we plan to implement activities so that the activities are engaging to the youth? Because we don't only want to attract, we want to retain. How will we formally acknowledge the youth's participation in the program and services? And this is where the rewards and the recognition. So there must not be just a reservoir of passing through the program, but there must be the recognized reward of coming through the program. And we must also set programs that can elevate them to other levels. Mr. President, this calls for us to implement enhanced strategies that will include collaborating with other social services agencies in order to create a holistic network of support, making programs and activities interesting, relevant, and engaging while providing safe space. Mr. President, you know, one of the things we do, and we don't recognize it, we assign staff that don't have the appropriate background and credentials to work with youth at risk. We can't have in this space square pegs in round holes. The persons who are working with youth at risk must have the appropriate background and credentials to lend support. And so we have to partner with agencies that serve youth at risk. So we have to partner with the detention centers, the court-referred delinquents, the wards of the states. And last but not least, we have to maintain a positive program experience for youth, acknowledging youth for the progress that they make. So if they go through, one of the things that we have to work with, you go through this training program as a youngster, go through the training program as a youth. There's a particular reward that you're going to look forward to. It's employability. You want to be sure and satisfied that the next measure is to ensure that they can find a job. Suitable and decent employment, appropriate with the certification and skill that they would have derived. So, President, it would be remiss of me not to speak about this other particular area that is of concern to me.
Not really.
No, and I recognize the change. Mr. President, I continue to consider the abuse of contract labor arrangements as being among the most precarious forms of employment, which in the long run serves the benefit of neither labor nor national interest. It is without question that the abuse of fixed-term contract arrangements forms one of the most widely existing threats to decent employment in Jamaica today. It should not be lost on us that companies are shirking their legal obligations to workers by replacing permanent jobs with contract and temporary employment of a precarious nature. And the abuse of contract arrangement has a deep impact on individuals and societies. It deprives people the stability required to take long-term decisions and plan their lives. Mr. President, when you have these situations, when you have, it started out with 2-year contracts, and it reduces to 1 year. We have seen situations where it has been reduced to 6 months and 3 months. Mr. President, I want to say this to you. There's an agency of the state that was brought to my attention that for today will be defined as an authority that has employees that are considered unskilled, that today, Friday, when they go for their pay, they sign another contract of a weekly arrangement. A weekly arrangement. So every day that they collect pay, they are signing a contract of a weekly arrangement. Mr. President, any HR practitioner that demonstrates that type of activity is horrible.
Is that legal? Is it legal?
I am not going to call the name today. No, I'm not going to call the name today, because investigations are being done. But that is horrible, Mr. President.
Absolutely. That is abusive. That's abusive.
The normalization of precarious work is already showing its deeply damaging impacts on society at large. In general, it leaves workers and communities in unstable and insecure situations. Even those who were once voluntary choose flexible employment to find cause for regret. Mr. President, a review in the hotel industry in Jamaica shows a difference in work organization and working hours between temporary agency workers and fixed-term contracts, vis-a-vis a full-time employee, leaving non-full-time employees even more vulnerable to other forms of precarious work arrangements. So if they have these short-term contracts, chances are they're going to look for other types of contracts to satisfy their needs. The precarious nature of employment relationship itself can cause precarious workers to experience poor emotional and mental health, because as job insecurity increases, the social benefits decrease. So workers face increasing pressure to accept jobs that put their health and safety at risk. And so the cycle continues. The precarious nature of employment in these contracts also leave workers excluded from social benefits such as health, pension, NIS, NHT benefits, which can lead to social exclusion. Mr. President, note should have been taken of a policy position expressed in the first MOU between the government of Jamaica and the JCTU, representing public sector workers, where it said, I quote, "The partners agree to support the principle of filling jobs with employees rather than contractors." Further note has been taken of the heads of agreement established between the GOJ and the JCTU representing public sector workers, spanning from 2017 to 2021, where the previous position was repeated, and the partners further agreed that the matter will be escalated to the level of the cabinet to clear directives to be issued, for clear directives to be issued, I would hasten the government to make good on its commitment, even as we conclude matters related to the new public sector compensation system. If it's going to start with treating with the precarious nature of employment, let's start within the public sector. No, I signed every MOU. You can't tell me about signing of MOUs. You need to go sign the one that is there now. Mr. President.
You know, colloquially, that's called poking the bear. I don't advise it.
Mr. President, I want to be clear that as night follows day, that the shock of this social inclusion and the absence of adequate pension arrangements will come home to haunt us if we do not take appropriate steps to treat with the epidemic, which is the abuse of contract labor arrangements. Outside of that warning, Mr. President, studies have shown that despite being employed, these workers and their families experience a lack of opportunity, and poverty can extend from one generation to the next, and these vulnerable workers are more likely to have a greater risk of injury, illness, and stress. Barriers of accessing health care, greater difficulty with family relationships and connections to the community due to working more than one job, and little time and money for education or training. I want to suggest that this, among other considerations, was the basis for the amendments in the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code, which was enacted on May 2nd, 2019. And this amendment, the following critical definitions were inserted. It defined contract worker, which means a person who is employed on a fixed-term contract. It defined fixed-term contract, which means an employment contract in which an employer recruits an employee for a limited period of time to perform a specific task. In the protection of the workers, the amendment to the Antigua Barbuda Labor Code went on further, defined as Clause 2 of Section C74A under the heading Contract Workers. A fixed-term contract shall not be issued to an employee for a position which is permanent in nature or which is covered by a collective bargaining agreement. Yet another critical area of amendment is to be found in Clause 5 of the said Section C74A, which states, a contract worker, and this is an important one now, President, a contract worker shall be deemed to be full-time employee if that worker's fixed-term contract, fixed-term contract is A, has been renewed by the employer on more or two or more occasions after the initial issuance, and B, the total contractual period of which the worker has been employed amounts in aggregate to 1 year or more. Mr. President, this provides for a level of security to these employees. And so when we review legislations in this Parliament, we adopt from the Commonwealth. Mr. President, whatever is good for the goose is good for the gander. And so if we adopt, we must adopt in the protection of the working class. It is the interest of the protection of employment in Jamaica that I want to suggest the mention above amendments to be reviewed and considered for inclusion in our own Labor Relation and Industrial Disputes Act and all other relevant areas in supporting labor legislation. Mr. President, it would be unreasonable for me to close without addressing a current matter which involves our private security guards and the industry to which they are employed. The dilemma, as some may think of it, others think of it as being positive, emanates from a declaration made by the Honorable Justice Batts in the Marksman versus NHT matter, finding security guards as being, in fact, employees and not independent contractors, has been placed since 1985 or thereabout. Something that we have in the trade union has been saying, that they are not independent contractors, they are in fact employees.
Sorry, Senator
Yes.
Gale. I know you won't take umbrage of the fact that I asked you just to yield for 1 minute so that we can acknowledge former Senator Arthur Williams, High Commissioner to Trinidad, who is passing through, but he had occasion. Well, I'd invited him to stay for lunch, but he has to leave. So we just wish you Godspeed and all the best for the Christmas. Thank you very much, Arthur. Go on. Go ahead, please, Senator.
Thank you. This well-founded judgment has impacted the security guards. It also impacted the security guard companies, the government, and all other stakeholders. And there has not been sufficient planning for the associated changes, which means that the guards are now entitled to have statutory deductions made on their behalf, question of regular overtime application, and all benefits enjoyed by employees, including sick leave, vacation, maternity leave, as well as any other allowance and provisions that may be available. We understand that such a judgment, the changes might not take place like the switch of a light. It's not. But it's deep concern relating to national interests, the industry and the guards and other stakeholders. Even the trade unions. What we have proposed in the first instance is a joint industrial council to treat with security guards, in order to protect the industry and also the players of the industry, which is critical to our society. There needs to be the greatest level of consultation between the parties to create the fix. It's not an overnight situation. It has created anxious moments, no doubt, for the security companies involved. And we need those security companies to create that enhanced security for our country. We also need the security guards, because they play a very pivotal role in our society. We must not see them as guardi or security. They are, in fact, professionals and must be recognized as such. And so, Mr. President, while we have no doubt that the government is seized of the matter, we must be divisive. We have to fix the anxious moment. And we hope and anticipate that within reasonable time, there can be consensus on these matters in order to protect the industry and the well-being of the security guards, who are anxiously looking forward to its conclusion so that they can benefit for what they have been deprived of for decades. So, Mr. President, in closing, it is always my responsibility to use this platform to to speak on matters related to labor. Today, I would have spoken about the public sector workers and the new compensation system. I would have spoken about the partnership. I would have spoken about productivity. I would have spoken about education and training of our labor force. I would have spoken about the abuse of contract labor arrangement and matters concerning our industrial security guards. President, these are matters that really, in my mind, prevail in the state of the nation. They are matters that concern our labor market. And being a resilient nation, these matters can be addressed in a positive way if we work together in partnership. The good thing, Mr. President, is that we have a government that cares about the working class. And it not only cares about the working class, it also cares about what the working class cares about. And so I'm positive that these issues can be addressed accordingly. On the matter of partnership, Mr. President, I want, on the matter of partnership, I want to end by recalling Helen Keller's prolific statement, and I quote, alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, President General Senator Gale. And I think that we have now Senator Campbell Rodriguez close the State of the Nation debate for this 2022. Go ahead, please, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just heard a scream.
Who scored? President?
Mr. President, I rise to close the State of the Nation debates for 2022. As I felt when I opened the debates a few months ago, I still feel honored and privileged, not just to be opening and closing the debate for 2022, but to be part of this review chamber doing great work on behalf of the people of Jamaica. Let me pause to again thank the Honorable Prime Minister and leader of the Jamaica Labour Party, Andrew Michael Holness, for appointing me here, thus allowing me to contribute to nation building. I also need to thank you, Mr. President, along with the leader of government business, Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith, and our whip, Senator Cavan Gale, who just spoke. The leadership afforded to me through the guidance from each of you has been invaluable. Thank you. To every single Senate colleague on this side and on the opposite side of the aisle, thank you as well. I have seen myself grow as a senator because of what I have learned in committees and here in the chamber on a Friday. Let me also say thank you to everyone who contributed to the State of the Nation debates. We must continue to participate and to do this necessary annual assessment of the state of the nation. Mr. President, colleagues, I speak today not to respond to all the points made in the speeches during the debates, but to remind us why we need to trust the process of building and recovery that our nation is currently undergoing. As parliamentarians within a Westminster system of governance, it is quite easy for the status quo to be where government members applaud all that is happening and opposition members decry everything as supporting for them would mean the government is doing something good. Let us commit that for 2023, we will all do what is best for Jamaica and her people. Let us rise above the limitations placed on us under the first-past-the-post system and make Jamaica and her people the priority at all costs. If the aim is Jamaica being her best self for her people, does it matter who is in power as long as the work is getting done? Yes. I sound naive, and I'm saying so while my own party is in power. But alas, when is it that we must as politicians acknowledge that Jamaica is more than our individual party in power? When is the right time to stop playing loose and dangerous with facts and instead call a spade and a rake a rake? Each party, the PNP and the Jamaica Labour Party, have contributed significantly in similar and different ways to build this great nation. Mr. President, it is easy and quite tempting for me to spend much more time focusing on hypocrisy and calling on us to work well together for the greater good. But on reflection, I realize that what Jamaicans want is not easy. Our people want hard work, representation that is proactive, and an understanding of the now into the future. Mr. President, I will aim in this speech to highlight some of what is happening in the country as far as governance is concerned and ask that as a nation, we trust the process. Why do I say this? Because getting our beautiful island on the right path is a process. It will not happen overnight, as it needs money and it needs to be sustainable. The Jamaica Labour Party has been in power since 2016. That is a fact. There is no going around that fact. What is also a fact is the certainty that an inordinate amount has been accomplished in constituencies across this country, as well as at the national level. Today, as I discuss the state of the nation, I will remind us of some of that work. If I were to remind of all, we would not leave when it is dark. We would leave when it is dark, and that is not the intention. The Jamaica Labour Party government has spent money unlike any other in the history of this country. There's no going around that fact either. Money has been spent on security to equip the police force with manpower, with better working conditions, with improved training, and with a chance to be trusted and acknowledged for the amazing work they do. There's hardly ever a time when someone from the government side gets up to speak about security and does not remind us all that the factors around solving security problems are being solved one at a time. So much so that at every opportunity there are insults hurled to say that this government promised that Jamaicans would be able to sleep with their windows and doors open. Yes, it was said, and guess what? It was meant. This is still the aspiration of this government. And if I know my Prime Minister and my Minister of National Security, it will happen. It will not be a quick fix, and it will not be an easy fix, but the crime monster will be curbed in this country under this government. Trust the process. Let us for a minute imagine that one is making chicken soup. The ingredients of chicken, water, carrot, dumplings, chocho, corn, scallion, pepper, thyme, salt may be involved. Now keep in mind that some of these ingredients are needed and some are desired. Nonetheless, this is the medley of ingredients. Try as one may, the soup cannot be made faster than how long the process takes. The ingredients need to be prepped, they need to be peeled and washed and put in a pot. And even after being placed in the pot, Mr. President, the soup will still need time to be cooked. Because Senator Gale is hungry, and because his mouth may show white squall, and Senator Williams over there may tease him about that white squall, it does not change the fact that soup making is a process. It does not change the fact that time is needed for the soup to cook. As a country, we have tried the shock and awe approaches. We have tried the police groups that are expected to bring fear and order. As a nation, I think we can, however, agree that long-term sustainable solutions to crime require less shock and awe and more strategy. Mr. President, in wrapping up my arguments around the state of security in this nation, I go back to make a comparison. to the soup analogy. Just as how the soup needs ingredients, so does the curbing of crime. Better working conditions for police, underway as we speak. More training, continuous. More tools to get the job done, being done, and will continue to be done. Sensitization and exposure to top-tiered policing, continuous. Up-top police intelligence, we can certainly commend our brothers and sisters of the police force for their marked better improvement, better performance in this area. One last point on this, Mr. President. We always argue that we need greater numbers of police officers. That is being worked on. In the second half of this year, 2022, there have been 2 batches of graduates of police officers. Each batch had a graduating class of over 300 persons. Since the start of 2022, over 1,200 individuals have graduated into the Jamaica Constabulary Force. With these numbers, in spite of the COVID interruptions and in keeping in mind the rate of approximately 360 officers leaving the force per year, it can be seen that soon the Jamaica Constabulary Force will meet the numbers as set out in the establishment. The work is being done to get us to the place where what we need our police force to do, they can. All the pieces are being put in place. What do we need now as a people to do? We need to trust the process and know that just like a pot of chicken soup, the right ingredients and time will bring something that even those who tease and mock will be proud of. Mr. President, Senator Longmore, in her contribution to the State of the Nation debate, spoke about love and the power of play. Love for each other and being more playful must not be scoffed at, as such strategies can be used to help curb the crime beast in our midst and solve problems around violence in schools. Coincidentally, Senators Brown and Gale also called for us to be more united as a country, for us to work together to achieve more. Love and unity with respect goes a far, far way. Mr. President, the state of the nation in Jamaica is not only in transition, but it is hopeful, getting stronger by the day, and on a path to ensure resilience. Now, my next comment, I don't want it to be mistaken as a brag. Instead, it is meant as a statement of fact. Minister Hill spoke to it, as did Senator Webby, when in their contributions to the State of the Nation debates. Mr. President, the state is, there is an overperformance of the Jamaican economy. That is a fact that cannot be argued against. My island nation is not defaulting on loans. Jamaica is paying debt on time. There is $3.5 billion in supplemental for roadworks. We are building roads without loans. Departure tax was budgeted at $8 million, but came in at $12 million for the first 6 months of the year. Let us not forget that this overachievement with the departure tax did not come from an increase in that tax. It came from an increase in numbers. Mr. President, Jamaica, our beautiful Jamaica, has successfully emerged from a global pandemic with a few bruises and delays, but no cut up, no beat up, no bang up. And Mr. President, to borrow from Honorable Nigel Clark, it was accomplished without new taxes, and it is a big deal. Mr. President, I could go on about the economy, but restraint is necessary. My joy and pride must not overshadow good sense, which says it's okay. Bragging is not always the best way forward. Let me talk instead about other areas with which Jamaica is in a good state. Let us start with the agricultural sector. And I'm talking about the agricultural sector because it's often ignored. There has been a 17.4% growth in the agricultural sector in the third quarter of 2022. That is from July to September. That is not just singular growth in one quarter. This 17.4% increase represents 6 consecutive quarters of growth since the second quarter of 2021. This accolade belongs not only to the government with its policies and programs, but most importantly to our farmers and fisher folks of this country, along with those who buy locally as much as is possible. Mr. President, there was a target set of local farming meeting 20% of the local demand for onion. I remind us that the target was surpassed and 40% of the national demand was met locally. Trust the process. We will get there. For potatoes, 70% of the national demand was met by local production. When we talk about agriculture, we often forget fisheries, but Mr. President, the National Fisheries Authority is now part of the Blue Justice community, which provides access to key services to improve the government's efforts to address fisheries. We can expect big things through this initiative facilitated by UNDP and funded by the Norwegian government. Mr. President, agriculture is not sexy and not exciting to many of us. But if we are to achieve food security, we need to keep ahead of the game, and we as a people need to ensure we know what is happening. The Grow Smart, Eat Smart initiative, which is a flagship strategy of the government to boost production and elevate the sector, needs all hands on deck. As I was sharing with Senator Fraser-Binns, I often leave here on a Friday after Senate and go to the market because I have to support my local farmers with their healthy food that they're selling right in the market, not buying the one in the supermarket wrapped up in plastic. There needs to be continued efforts to increase domestic food production, which is a key component of the work being undertaken by Minister Charles and his team. Mr. President, Senator Webby, as did Minister Hill, mentioned that the export bill for Jamaica is too high. Minister Hill highlighted that in only 1 year did our exports exceed our imports since independence. 1966, it was Minister Hill. I quote from Senator Webby when he said, Jamaica needs to cut its import bill from US $1 billion to 500 million US dollars by 2030. He further suggested that what is needed is more import substitution. Mr. President, he is correct. Let us do what needs to be done to make this happen. Mr. President, I know I mentioned before that we're building roads without loans. I think I need to expand a little bit on that to show how this government is working to build infrastructure across the nation. The South Coastal Highway Improvement Project is a big deal. It includes work on the eastern coast of the island in St. Thomas with major roadworks which began in January 2017 and are now slated to end in March 2025. There is a Maypen to Williamsfield Road, which is a little over 80% completed. In July of this year, work began on the Morant Bay Urban Centre. In Portmore, plans are afoot to make Portmore the 15th parish. As a former councillor in Portmore, I could not have been prouder to sit on the Joint Select Committee to review the concept of Portmore being a parish. With a new status will come the Portmore Resilient Park. In Montego Bay, there is the Perimeter Road starting from Ironshore to Bogue and from Montego Bay down to Montpellier. These are all actions being undertaken to reignite our nation for greatness. Mr. President, in his contributions to these debates, Senator Sinclair, who we know have a bias towards the western end of this island, along with Senator Allen, spoke to the work that is taking place to improve the life of Jamaicans in those parishes. But I take the time to repeat something that Senator Sinclair spoke about, the issue of housing. As a nation of primarily black people, housing means more to us than simply shelter. It is a pride of place issue tied to our ancestry of slavery. Within that vein, Mr. President, it begs mentioning that the Honourable Prime Minister Andrew Holness has committed to 70,000 housing solutions in 5 years. That is important as it matters to Jamaicans when they see that construction in the country is not just about big hotels and highways. It is also seeing themselves and people who look like them getting a house which is properly constructed every Friday. The social housing project through our Prime Minister's office provides dignity and hope. There is a reason he's called the builder. There is a reason our Prime Minister and leader of the Jamaica Labour Party was recently given the distinction of being conferred the 2022 David Richardson Jr. International Nation Builders Award by the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. Some of us may not know of this award with the way we know of others, so let me remind us of a few previous recipients. Former U.S. Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, Vice President of the USA and a woman of Jamaican heritage, Kamala Harris, and President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo. Not bad company at all. This award shows us that on the international stage, Jamaica and her Prime Minister are held in high regard. Mr. President, our Minister with responsibility for water, climate change and the environment, Senator Matthew Samuda, spoke in his presentation to the fact that water is an essential commodity to human life. He further stated, and I quote, "This administration understands that the availability of water has an impact on the entire society, affecting all sectors, including health, security, agriculture, industry, among other things." Mr. President, I am most happy and proud to see that the NWC has installed and plan to install more solar panel systems, which will improve the work they do and in turn provide better service to customers. The Minister also reminded us about the Turn on the Pipe Thursdays. This is where water systems in underserved communities are turned on. Mr. President, the Minister also highlighted, and I think it's important to note, that work on the environment and relating to climate change is also taking place. Not only is there greater education, but Jamaica's presence on the world stage puts us directly in line to benefit from global measures to support climate change and the environment issues. Jamaica has also advanced a holistic national disaster risk financing strategy. Mr. President, in relation to the environmental program of work, I was heartened to hear the progress being made in legislative reform. The announcements from the Minister that the NRCA and the Wildlife Protection Act will be amended to deal with serial polluters appropriately, but beyond that, these amendments will allow us to finally ratify the SPAW protocol. Mr. President, it is also important for me to acknowledge the suggestion by Senator Fraser Binns, where she suggested that a modern system to deliberately act quickly on environmental issues be established. The Senator noted that some environmental cases have been languishing in the courts for years without being resolved. The idea of a tribunal to handle such matters is a reasonable call and one which I would support. Mr. President, our leader of government business, Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith, contributed to the State of the Nation debate, and she took the time to remind us of the partnerships forged through her leadership under this government. We may be an island, but we are not existing in an isolated state. Good relations abroad are just as important as good relations locally. On the world stage, our country is regarded not just for our music or musicians and for our athletic prowess and amazing food. Jamaica is also known for its diplomatic relations, which have seen our opinions and support sought. It has seen bilateral and multilateral successes. Our diaspora movement is one of the best in the world in terms of its organization and structure. Jamaicans at home and abroad love this country. And wherever one travels, there's usually a Jamaican and a proud one to boot. Keeping those relations alive and thriving and cementing ways of trade and exchanges is just some of what the Minister reminded us of during her presentation. On the world stage, Jamaica is thriving. Jamaica is in a good state, but Mr. President, there is always more that can be done, and there is more that is being tended to that has not yet been revealed. An elephant in many rooms is the state of litter and debris across this country. Mr. President, as the average person would say on the street, the place dirty. Plastic bottles, garbage, etc. are around in the open. There is no denying that more needs to be done to keep Jamaica clean and beautiful. With the arrival of the 50 new garbage trucks, we now have approximately 110 plus garbage trucks in the system, with another 50 on order for delivery in the near future. The ability to, in a timely manner, collect garbage across the island will help to alleviate the problems we now face. Additionally, we know that as a people, our garbage is more and more complex than it was, say, 20 years ago. But our garbage disposal systems have not been upgraded enough to match this complexity. That is the reason, Mr. President, that the 2 new waste disposal sites that are being built are important. Hear me clearly. New dumps are not being built. Instead, modern sanitary landfills are what are being constructed. In the near future, there will no longer be uncontrollable fires at Riverton Dump. The Riverton Dump has served us well, but also has caused us much pain. It will be decommissioned. Mr. President, a waste-to-energy plant will be built, and we know that when this government says that something will be done, it happens. No staying in the pipeline with plans for this country. Mr. President, as mentioned by the Prime Minister recently, garbage collection will be put in the hands of the private sector. I am sure we all look forward to the details on that divestment. Nonetheless, Mr. President and colleague senators, us as a people need to take responsibility for keeping our immediate and wider surroundings cleaner. Let us commit to not tossing trash through our vehicle windows or on the streets when we walk. Businesses need to pay to discard rubbish properly. Families living near drains and gully need to not dump the garbage from their backyards into these facilities. The government has a responsibility to ensure the country is kept clean, as do every citizen to contribute to that cleanliness. Mr. President, I use this moment to call for the Solid Waste Management Act to be brought soon to a joint select committee of this Parliament for review. There needs to be greater fines for littering. There needs to be a system to penalize the owners of cement trucks that spill along roadways and cause unnecessary and avoidable road damage, which leads to a shortchanging of the purchasers of concrete. Mr. President, while I am on the topic of reviewing laws, let me take the opportunity to highlight that we have laws on our books that are in urgent need of review. The Domestic Violence Act immediately comes to mind. I am happy that Minister Grange has said it will be before this House in short order. We look forward to that. There is the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which was previously before a joint select committee. The committee needs to be reconstituted and the bill moved forward to becoming law. Jamaica needs data collection on laws around the care economy. Too many people, both men and women, but especially women, participate in unpaid work to their own, oftentimes, downfall. The country and her economy would actually benefit from this transition to acknowledging and working to formalize a care economy. The Child Care and Protection Act, which focuses on the rights of children in places of safety, the age of criminal responsibility, among other things, also need to be revised. Mr. Chairman, the law that will allow Ms. Agatha in Maidenhall, St. Mary, to collect her prescription at a pharmacy in Guysill without first having to go back to the clinic in Gale also needs to be reviewed. It cannot continue to be where electronic prescriptions are only acceptable if the person has a paper prescription to bring when going to collect the medicine. This old system is causing some of our poorer people hardship. We need to fix it. Mr. President, if we are to approach the creation and passing of new and the revision of older legislation in a sustainable manner, we must streamline our systems. The country needs more legislative drafters. Each ministry needs at least one highly capable and trained legal officer with skill in legislative drafting. Mr. President, it would be nothing short of remiss of me not to correct some of what came out in the State of the Nation addresses from Senators Morris and Crawford. I mention these two specific because misinformation in this time is dangerous. Not can be dangerous, but is dangerous. No power is worth the harm done by presenting misleading facts. If incorrect information was given, because the giver did not have the correct facts, I urge each of us in this House to use the researchers who are here to assist us to fact-find. The researchers can be contacted through the Office of the Deputy Clerk, for those who do not know. If the aim is to mislead, to get likes, and to make sound bites for news outlets, let us find other ways to make the news. Misleading people who look up to us is never, ever a good thing. Mr. President, through you, I would like to point out to Senator Gabriella Morris to the fact that there has not been an increase in migration the way she portrayed it. The numbers do not support the argument. According to data released by the United Nations, the current net migration rate for Jamaica in 2022 is negative 3.808 per 1,000 population. That represents a 0.42 decline from 2021. There has not been an increase in migration. That is a fact. Mr. President, we don't make up numbers. Mr. President, through you to Senator Crawford, who happens to not be here this week, I want to use his misstep in using UNICEF numbers in an inaccurate way, as publicly corrected by them, to say we can and we must do better. Nothing is worth misleading people who depend on us to be accurate. There is no need for me to repeat this specific misinformation. I urge all of us in the Senate on both sides to stay on the side of facts, argue logically and with integrity from a research-based perspective at all times. Mr. President, before I wrap up, let me take this opportunity to thank the staff here at Garden House. Thank you to the clerk for leading a team in whom I have seen such improvement in the 2 years since being appointed to the Senate.
Mr. President, I would like to ask that the Speaker's time be extended to allow her to complete her presentation.
Question is that the Speaker's time be extended to allow her to conclude her presentations. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just repeat that. Thank you to the clerk for leading a team in whom I have seen improvement in the 2 years of being appointed to the Senate. I especially now love the fact that we can get help with our research, so no excuses from any of us for misleading. Mr. President, I urge all Jamaicans to trust the process that is currently being undertaken to move Jamaica forward. As my grandmother used to say, nothing good happens quickly. Mr. President, let us be honest with all Jamaicans and let them know that the two countries we seem to admire so much, Rwanda and Singapore, did not become what they are overnight. It took time, it took resources, it took planning, it took long-term thinking, and it took a trust in the process. Mr. President, let us trust the process as we move Jamaica forward. Mr. President, I now ask that the motion be approved.
Thank you, Senator Campbell Rodriguez. And the question is for the motion to be approved. Those in favour? Those against, the ayes have it. Motion approved.
Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today. I ask that the sitting be suspended for a date to be fixed.
Question is for the Senate to be suspended for adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Senator Marks?
I think there's an understanding that there should be a motion on the adjournment on Disability Awareness Week, Senator Samhuda. And I rise, Mr. President, to bring to the attention of this honorable chamber that last week we observed internationally and locally Disability Awareness Week, which culminated in activities on the 3rd of December, which was last week, Saturday. And the theme for International Disability Awareness Day this year is titled Transformative Solutions for Inclusive Development, the Role of Innovation in Fueling an Accessible World. Mr. President, the theme is appropriately fitting and fittingly appropriate in light of the global environment and also local environment as it relates to persons with disabilities. Because it is a fact that for persons with disabilities to be meaningfully included in society, greater innovation and modern assistive technologies have to play a pivotal role. And it is against that backdrop that the theme was selected for this year. And it has been marked by a number of activities led by the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. And in fact, activities have spilled over to this week, where the Ministry of Education will be hosting a number of seminars as it relates to disability awareness. Mr. President, disability awareness should not just be confined to the first week of December, but should be an ongoing engagement as we seek to debunk some of the myths associated with persons with disabilities over centuries. And I want to implore all members of society to understand that disability is not something that we are exempted from. You know, we can have a snap and moment of time and just get a slip and we end up with a disability. But we must always maintain in the back of our mind, Senator Webby, that having a disability does not equate to inability. Because with modern technologies, we are able to live as near normal as possible in terms of our lives. And I want to say, Mr. President, that's why I was extremely proud to be invited by the government of Saudi Arabia to speak at their biennial Disability Studies conference held by the King Salman Center for Disability Studies. Just week I came back 3 o'clock this morning from Saudi Arabia. But I tell you, Mr. President, among other things, in my presentation, I made a global call for a global technology fund to make more assistive technology available to persons with disabilities in developing countries. Because the research is showing that developing countries, up to 85% of persons with disabilities in developing countries have access to one form of modern assistive technology. Whereas in developing countries, it is between 3 to 10%. There is a significant gap between the developing countries and developed countries. And that is something that developing countries must pay attention to, because the latest data released by World Health Organization on the population of persons with disabilities just last Friday is showing that 16% of the world's population have some form of disability, 1.35 billion, or just over 1 billion living in developing countries. And so you can understand the reason why persons with disabilities in developing countries are struggling for inclusion and struggling where poverty is concerned because of the lack of available modern assistive technology to facilitate that inclusion in society. And we will continue to push for that, Mr. President. And I crave members of the Jamaican society, I crave members of the Jamaican government to make sure that we pay attention to this. And I recall that we brought the Disabilities Act into effect in February of this year. And I want to commend Minister Samuda for that. But I also want to urge him to light some fire under the tail of those who are charged with the responsibility to implement the legislation, to run with it. It is a tool that is designed to empower persons with disabilities, and the persons with disabilities on the ground are saying they are yet to start feeling the effect. Whilst I appreciate that the changes are not going to be immediate, but we need to start seeing and feeling some action as a consequence. I wish for every person with disability in Jamaica all the best in terms of their future endeavors as we continue to fight for inclusion and participation of persons with disabilities in the broader Jamaican society. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Morris. And I also wish to just thank you very much for the book that you presented to me this morning, Cultural Inclusion, The Case of Persons with Disabilities in Jamaica, by Dr. Floyd Morris. I am going to have the opportunity to peruse it this weekend, but I thank you very much. I noticed that just from a cursory glance that it has a number of testaments, if you will, of stakeholders in the table of contents. Stakeholders in the sense that you are dealing with a number of case studies, I should have said, not stakeholders, case studies. Very interesting to me is you make mention of Don Drummond and a number of other persons who have disabilities who have made tremendous contributions to the cultural development of this country. I notice most of them are in the field of culture. No doubt one of these days you will pen a book that speaks to those persons with disabilities who have made contributions to business and to the intellectual development of the country. So once again, I find myself having to congratulate you and to recognize you for the work you have done in this field, a space that you have really carved out a tremendous era in. And congratulations again, and I do hope that persons who have the capacity to do so get your hands on the book and continue to support Dr. Floyd Morris's intellectual journey. Thank you very much, Senator Morris. Senator Longmore.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I rise to join in congratulating Senator Floyd Morrison on his accomplishments as always, but also to clearly bring attention to the Disabilities Week that was being celebrated from the 3rd of December to today. The actual last event in that week of activities today, which is the Founders Day activity targeting the early stimulation program. And I want to just bring our attention to the fact that this year in Jamaica, in addition to the international theme that is being recognized, our local Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities decided to also emphasize our local focus on embracing the Disabilities Act towards inclusion. As you all remember, we brought the Disabilities Act into our laws in February of this year. And we particularly celebrate that. Again, another effort heralded by Senator Floyd Morrison. And I particularly would love to bring attention to the aspect of that act that recognizes and enables mental illnesses and mental disorders as being recognized now as a disability that can be supported by the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. I take this opportunity to encourage, as we all know, persons usually with physical impairments or physical disabilities, because I always say that you're not disabled, you're otherwise enabled, they tend to be the ones who are focused in the registration for the benefits that can be had through the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. However, with this act being in place, that submission has now been expanded, and the actual form for registration of persons with disabilities has been expanded to include psychological issues and psychiatric disorders. And so I take this opportunity to encourage our persons who might be affected with psychological and psychiatric illnesses to seek this support. It is there, and a lot of persons don't know this. And again, I underscore our support for Senator Morris. I especially recognize your efforts on the international scale in terms of support for technology in our developing world. It is very needed, and it would be very significant in advancing the capabilities of our people. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Longmore. Senator Samuda.
It is, once again, not intended for any further business. It's not intended for any further business to be conducted today, President. We ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. See everybody next Friday.
The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? Mr. Honorable Senate now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed. Thank you.
Over 100 murders in 1 month, Jamaica? We can't continue like this. The killing must end. Do right by the future generation. Get the guns, save